Rafael's scenario is more of a hypothetical nature, but I want to bring a new dimension to that particular scenario. The new dimension is that on the North Cuban basin, there have been discoveries of oil, which is about between 5 to 9 billion barrels of oil and about 10 to 22 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. However, this oil discovery is in deeper waters, and in order to exploit it, one needs technology which can deal with the deep water exploration. Right now, China, India, Brazil, Spain, and Venezuela are the ones which are looking towards the development of these fields. However, there are only two partners which may have the kind of technology which is needed, and that is Brazil, which has been doing some deep water exploration, and Repsol of Spain, which itself doesn't have the technology, but what it is looking towards is the Norwegian technology, because Norway has the expertise to develop those particular fields. Now, this creates a situation which is a challenge as far as the United States itself is concerned. Because as far as US is concerned, just 50 miles across the border of South Florida, you are seeing the exploration taking place, deep water drilling taking place, whereas the technology, the leader in this particular technology, United States itself. And there is no way that United States can see itself sitting aside and letting this thing happen without benefiting from this development. So what I see, I'm an eternal optimist. What I see is that the scenario which we are portraying in terms of the long-term, taking much longer to normalize relationships between Cuba and United States, I don't think it's going to be that long term. The new administration, as soon as it comes in, will have to start looking at it more urgently, because it is the lobby in Washington of the oil industry is very strong. And it means that if these fields are developed, they will generate a surplus of petroleum which can be exported to the US market, and US will have interest in that. So US interest is in the surplus available from the North Basin, plus investments which will take place in terms of development of those fields and deep sea drilling. And the thirdly, which the Cuban Minister of the Industries had just very recently in the last Petro-Caribe meeting had mentioned that they want to bring their capacity, refining capacity, to about 350,000 barrels, which means that you need investments in that refining capacity. All old capacity will have to disappear, because this is basically very small old capacity will be refurbished or brought back, but mostly about 300,000 barrels per day of refining capacity will be all brand new capacity. And that will require investments. So what we are looking at, Cuba's demand is increasing. Cuba currently consumes about 150,000 barrels per day. It will go in another 6-7 years, about 350,000 barrels per day. The development of the North Basin will produce about, let us say, 550 to 600,000 barrels per day, which means 350,000 barrels per day can go into the refining, and rest is for exportable surplus, which will be available. Whether it goes to the United States market or to any other markets, that's a question that will have to be seen. Thirdly, what will have to happen is that all the power plants which are currently operating, they are old and they require to be replaced. If we have to have tourists, there is going to be demand for more oil. There is going to be demand for more reliable electricity production in Cuba. So what would happen is that in order to provide for that, those plants, which is about, I think it's a 4 gigawatt of the generation capacity which exists in Cuba today, and a lot of it will have to be replaced. So there are investments needed in all these areas. Now, how these investments are going to take place? Of course, there are a number of oil companies, which are what we say, the national oil companies of various countries, which have certain arrangements, but they may not be able to provide the kind of investments which are needed. PDVSA, I don't think, will have that kind of financing to fully finance the oil sector development, because what the development of the North Basin requires about $3 to $4 billion of investment just for that particular field, and that investment is not going to come from one source, it will have to come from many sources. So what I see is that, one, Cuba will have the relationship between Cuba and United States will be normalized earlier than what is expected. And secondly, there will be a serious development effort as far as the energy sector is concerned. And thirdly, what Cuba needs is a long-term comprehensive national energy strategy and policy which should support security of energy supplies, development sustainability, economic efficiency, including energy efficiency and intensity, and provide enabling regulatory framework to attract foreign investments while fully protecting the environment in Cuba. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mian. Now we proceed with the last presentation of the panel by Dr. David Lewis from Manchester Trade.
Thank you, Jose Raul. My apologies to my colleagues on the table. I was delayed unnecessarily, and I'm glad I made it in time for my slot, that it wasn't rented out. I'd like to thank the Woodrow Wilson Center in Washington and CaPRI for the invitation to participate in this program, which actually attracted our interest both because of work in this area, but also the stimulus and the interest in coming back to Mona. I came to school here some 20-something odd years ago and have visited back and forth, but I don't think I'd actually been invited by the university to speak back. So it's always good, as you all know, when your alma mater invites you back and you can come and exchange views. I'd like to share with you some ideas with regards to the renewable fuel component of the energy relationship in the Caribbean, and some ideas as to its linkage with Cuba and development there of that market. First and foremost, this is now a big, sexy topic in the region, in the United States, globally, the use of feedstock, whether it be vegetable, food, wood, waste, to be produced in some form of biofuel, biodiesel, ethanol, other components. And sometimes we lose track of what I call the structural framework in which this is developed. This is not new. Biofuels have been around for at least 2 to 3 decades. They've been produced at both artisanal and commercial viable levels in the Americas, in the Caribbean, in Asia. We, of course, all know of the Brazilian model. Brazil is now 75% energy self-sufficient, in great part to a decision made 30 years ago to go the route of renewable fuels. People need to remember that was possible because 30 years ago, Brazil was not a democracy. So the decision to say, this is what we're going to do, and everybody in the government and the private sector, this is the way we're going, was mandated by a military regime. No legislation, no discussion, no debate, no pros or cons. 30 years ago, people thought the Brazilians were crazy. Sugar to produce ethanol, to produce gasoline, impossible. Well, 30 years later, they are 75% energy sufficient. If indeed the hydrocarbon, oil, and gas reserves which have been identified on the Atlantic coast come through, Brazil expects to be 100% energy self-sufficient by the year 2015.